Alright, hey guys, welcome to another tutorial here. Today we're working back in Unreal Engine 3 UDK. Just to show off something I found out while I was working on the physics gun level. I found this really cool Kismet reference code. It's Unreal script code, but if you just place it into your build of UDK, you are given basically these cool Kismet nodes that allow you to display textures on screen on the HUD, display custom text on the HUD, and materials onto the HUD. I put a link in the description of the Kismet example video. I'm also going to put a link to it as well in the description of this video. Check it out. You'll be able to download them and you just put them into your build and then recompile the scripts, and then you got these nodes. But before I show you the nodes, let me just show you what this whole thing does. So basically, in my physics gun game, I'm having the player be able to find these nodes that are throughout each of the different rooms. Just to display like story elements, things like that. So here's a note, and if there's a trigger attached to it, and if you get near it and touch it, there's the first part of the HUD, a custom message. Press E to read message. That's actually custom text. It's not your typical kind of like voice announcement or text announcement node. You're able to position this anywhere on screen. You can change what kind of font it's using. You can change the color of the actual text. And you can do everything like that. So when you press E, you get this. So right now, I can't move anything. In the code, well, not in the code, but in the Kismet we're going to set up, I toggled cinematic mode where you're not able to move anything. But besides that, you can see there's that custom texture on screen, has the message. So I created this in Photoshop, wrote the message out. So that's actually just a texture. And then on the bottom of that texture, there's another additional text message saying press Q to exit the message. So if we press Q, the node itself disappears, the actual texture on screen disappears, and all the abilities of the actual node's gone. So you just picked up the node. So that's what we're going to do. So let's just start from scratch. So, first things first, we're going to go to View, World Properties, and just change the game type like we usually do. Change that to UT Game. I'm also going to uncheck, default. No default inventory for player. So now when we play, we're walking with a blank screen basically. So next, we're going to go ahead and set up the note. So this is actually a custom material that I made, as well as a material instance that I used from the build from the Afflicted. We had a bunch of cool materials, so I implemented that as well. But the first things first, the actual node itself is just a plane. So right now you can't really see it because it's one-sided, and it's rather large. So what we're going to do, you just scale it down, put it up here. Kind of go into non-uniform, make it a little stretchier in that axis, make it a little longer. And let me rescale it. There we go. Now we're just going to place it against the wall. And we're also going to make this an interactor so that we can destroy it. Basically, when you pick up the message and exit the message, that note's going to go away. So let's right-click on it, go down to Convert, Mover. This doesn't need any collision or anything like that, it's just a note. So now what we need to do is actually put the material on. So, whatever material you'll end up having, you'll go ahead and put that on. But I believe mine is under Message. So right here, just going to drag that right on. And I gave it the glowing effect. That's actually part of the material that we use for the Afflicted for item pickups. So just so it stands out a little more. So now when we jump in, the message is right there. No big deal. There's no interaction or anything just yet. So what we'll need next is just a trigger. So let's right click, Add Actor, and then we're going to go to Add Trigger. Now with this trigger, I like to make it a little smaller just because the item we're interacting with is pretty small. So I'm going to change the draw scale to 0.25 just so the actual icon for the trigger is small. It doesn't affect the radius or anything like that. Just makes things a little manageable. But for the actual radius itself, we're going to hit F4 with the trigger selected. under collision height and collision radius, that's where we're going to change it. So I believe 10. Now let's do 15 by 15. That is enough, so that looks good. So now we can actually get started with the actual scripting aspect of this. So let's open up Kismet. First thing we're going to do is the initial touch event, where on screen it's going to say press E to read message. So with our actual trigger selected in the scene, let's right click into Kismet and do new event using trigger 1, which is the one we have, or make it a touch event. And the only thing we're going to change in the settings is the max trigger count. We're going to make that 0, just so this can fire multiple times until the actual player reads the message. From here, this is where we're going to start using those custom nodes that Unreal script code is going to give you. So the first one is actually just the main event node. So if you go to new event, it's going to be external HUD and render HUD. It's going to give you this really simplistic event node. All it really has is just an out. But all we need to do, I don't know why, but when it's first enabled and you try to draw a text, it's going to draw it right away. And you won't be able to turn it on and off if it's turned on at the very beginning. So we need to make sure that it's disabled. So uncheck enabled. And that's all I really need to do. So to draw text, let's go to new action, external HUD. And this is where we have render material, render text, and render texture. So right now we want to render just text. This is what the node looks like. Plug that in. And now in the actual settings, if you look down here, we need to check a couple things. So the actual position, this is the actual position on screen, X and Y. So I believe X is just left to right, and then Y is up and down. So positive X is actually down. No, positive Y is going down. So if you make it like 300, do 300 pixels down, and if you do 300 pixels in the X, it's going to do 300 to the right. What I found for this message, it does go, but depending on how much text is in the actual message, on how it will really center up on screen. But for this message, I know 500 by 300 is good. For the color, this is, we're going to leave it a white text, but for right now, we'll make it blue just so we know that works. And then the actual text, one or two things can happen. You can actually put a string node in here with the actual text in there, or you can just go in here, check text, and then put in whatever you want. I prefer this second method, so I'm going to put in press E to read message. And then from there, all we need to do is pick a font. So UDK comes with a bunch of fonts. All you have to do is go in your content browser, is go into UDK game, just type in font, and these are all your fonts. So pick one you like. For the sake of it, I'll just pick Ambex Heavy 10. But then back in our Kismet, with that font selected, just hit that green arrow, and now it's locked in. So now to get this to work, we need to implement the toggle node. So if you hold down T and left click, it brings down the toggle. For the event, we're going to toggle this render HUD, and then when it is touched, we turn it on, and then when it's untouched, we turn it off. Pretty straightforward. So let's go ahead and see if that's working at the very least so far. So when we touch that trigger, we should get the message, press E to read message, which we do, but the font that we used is pretty small, so it's hard to really read. So let's just go ahead and pick a different font at that point. So I'm just going to choose Pasatech. Go back into Kismet, under the render text, just click the green arrow with the new one. Now this should be easier to read. Yeah, which it is. You see the colors there, you see the actual messages there. It kind of follows you along. And then when you back out, it goes away, come back. So we know that's working, which is really good. The only thing I'm going to change is I'm going to change the color. I'll make it red. Past that, what we need to do now is the actual texture, putting that on screen, the actual message that you want to display. So just in order to do that much, we need a different render HUD initial event. And then instead of render text, let's go to New Action, External HUD, Render Texture. Plug that in. So now, actual size, we're going to check that. Leave it at 0, 0, just because it's going to use the actual size of the texture. If you want it to stretch or anything, you can put it there. We need to check actual position. This is where it's going to show up on the position on the screen. I believe 300 by 300 is okay. And then everything else is going to be pretty much the same. The only thing we need to do now is actually tell it what texture to render. So let's go into our content browser. In my package here, I just have a bunch of different messages here. So I'm just going to pick one. Back in Kismet, hit that green arrow. And now we have that set up, but now we need to set up a trigger used event. Just because when you use a trigger, you press E basically. So with that trigger selected in our scene, let's right click to a new event using trigger _1. Let's do used. And the same thing applies with that toggle. So let's copy and paste that toggle, disconnect whatever event it was on. So when that's used, we're going to turn that on. And then the event is going to be this HUD that's rendering that texture. So now that should work. Let's go ahead and test that out. We'll see if the positioning is correct and everything like that. So we press E. It doesn't look like it's working. Okay. So far, not working for us. Let's see what's going on. So we got the texture. Let's change the actual size. Let's do 500 by 500. Let's see if that makes a difference. There we go. Okay, so you do need to change the size because when it's 0, 0, it's basically nothing. So we know that's working, but obviously the positioning is not right. So back in Kismet, so with the 500 by 500, I believe we need to make this maybe about 100, and maybe this about 350 to kind of center it up. Let's go ahead and test again. Okay, that's almost there. Okay, so I'm just going to adjust this a little bit more, just my OCD here. Let's make this 525, and that should be good. So now we have, playing it again, we have the message coming up, and we have, that coming in, and we also have the actual message on screen. So far, so good. But now the message itself stays on screen. So what we want to do now is, first we're going to put the message to let the player know if they press the Q key that they're going to be able to exit the message. So with that, we're going to do another render event, but it's going to be a render text, and this text is going to say press Q to exit message, and I want this to show up below the positioning of the actual texture. So the texture, its actual position goes to 100. But this one, its Y, I believe, is going to be 500. But just in order to see that come up, we need another toggle. So let's copy and paste that. Turn this one on. And put it to this event. So now when we start reading the message, the text, press Q to exit message, should show up on screen somewhere. So it's kind of, we need it to be a little bit lower. So instead of 500, let's try 600. Instead of 500, let's try 475, just to see if we can't center it up a little bit better. Alright, and it's right there at the bottom. So we see that. So far, so good. So again, I'm going to actually change just the color of the text to white. I think it's easier to read that way. Just make that 475 as well, so that matches up. Color, it's going to be white. So again, let's play it one more time. Alright, So far so good, but now as you can see, the messages are kind of stuck and we can move around. We obviously don't want to have that. So what we're going to do is get a toggle cinematic mode. So it's right click, new action, toggle cinematic mode. Go plug that into enable. And then target, hold down the P key, left click on that. Gives you all players, so we're going to uncheck all players just so it affects just the player. But in the toggle cinematic, we're going to uncheck hide HUD and uncheck disable input. If we had the hide HUD checked, the HUD elements won't show up, and if we disabled input, the player won't be able to press the Q key to actually exit the message. So let's go ahead and double check this, make sure that's working. So we're going to read the message. So now I can't move, no matter what I'm doing here. But if we press Q, nothing happens. So what we're going to do, we're going to set that up in just a moment. There's one more toggle I want to do. It's just to toggle off the press E to read message. That original message that we have on screen. We don't want that to show up anymore. So let's just disable that one. And we're also going to disable the touch event. Just because once you start reading the message, we're going to destroy it once you quit. And then from there, you're not going to be able to read the message ever again. So we don't want that touch event to ever be recognized going forward. So now, what we'll need to do, just to make sure pressing Q works, I'm going to create first a Boolean variable. We're going to name this B, and then reading message. Then we're going to create another variable. It's just going to be a named variable. It's going to be a Boolean expected type, and then the name of it's going to be B reading message. Drag that out. And whenever we use that trigger, we basically want to set this Boolean to true because they're reading the message. So let's go to new action, set variable, and then bool. Plug that in. Our target is going to be this named variable. The value, let's just right click, create a new bool. Change the 0 to a 1 to make it true. So whenever we use this trigger, it's going to tell us, hey, yeah, you're reading the message, that's true. Because what we want to do is have that Q input event, but we only want that to fire if the player is reading the message, not anytime they want. So now we have the Boolean needed to make that check happen. So let's right click, new event, input, key, button pressed. Only thing we have to change is we're going to add an input name, and we're just going to put in the letter Q, just capitalized. That's all we really need. And when we do that, we go ahead, we need a new condition, comparison, compare bool. Every time that's pressed, we're going to compare that B reading message Boolean. So let's copy and paste that named variable. And if it's true, if they are reading the message, we're going to do a bunch of toggles here. So the first one, we're going to go ahead and turn off the material render, or the texture render, I should say, of the actual message. So let's attach that to that guy. Then we're going to turn off the text for press Q to quit. So let's put that into this guy. Then we're going to go ahead and just completely turn off cinematic mode. So let's copy and paste the cinematic node here. And we're going to hit disable. And whenever you do disable, whatever is unchecked will then become checked. So just make sure everything's checked, just to make sure everything gets disabled properly. And then from there, we should be good. Everything should be functioning correctly. Let me just straighten that line out. So let's go ahead and play, see what we get here. So we have the message, press E to read message. Press E, the message comes up. We're not able to move or anything. If we press Q, the message disappears. We're able to move around again. And there's no more HUD elements. This trigger doesn't work. So far, everything's working great. So now for some finishing touches. Let's go ahead and destroy the interactor when the player picks it up. So making sure that's selected. Let's go back into Kismet. We're going to do it when the trigger is actually used. So at the very end of this line, let's go to new action, actor, destroy. Plug that in. And then making sure the interactor note is selected in your scene. Let's right click on target and then use that interactor. So that's going to get destroyed. So the last finishing touch I like to have with this, I was able to find a really nice kind of paper pickup sound effect. So with that, let me just type in paper. So this is what the paper sound is. I'm not too sure if you guys can hear that. It's just basically kind of like a paper fold. But making sure that sound cue is selected in your content browser. Let's go back into Kismet. You can find that online for free, that sound node. Just type in like paper flip or paper noises, something like that. But with that sound cue in the editor selected, let's go to New Action, Sound, Play Sound. You plug that into play, and then in the Play Sound option, with it selected in the content browser, you can go ahead and just hit that green arrow. And now when you pick it up, that sound's going to play. But I also want that sound to play when we quit the message as well. So we're going to copy and paste that and put that into the Q key button pressed event. So now what we need to do is just clean it up. Let's just comment this. So the bottom section is the quit message logic. This one is going to be our touch event logic. And then this guy right here is our main message logic. So everything's commented. Let's just go ahead and comment this guy too, this one variable. Just name it variables. And we should be good to go. So let me first build lighting, just to make it nice and pretty. And then we're going to make sure everything's working. If it is, we'll call it a day at that point. If not, we'll figure out what's going on. So we're almost there, 80%. It's always the last percent that takes the longest. I don't know if you noticed that with anything with computers. I find it to be the case a lot of the time. So let's run light mass. During this time, I am still working on Unreal Engine 4 tutorials. I'm actually going to make one today. I'm really working on trying to get a breakout kind of clone working. Right now I have the paddle. If you actually, it's in the tutorials for Unreal Engine 4. It's a progress video. I have the player paddle being able to move left and right, and I have the ball hitting walls and everything. So we got the collision right. I'm still working on the actual breakout bricks, having them have a point value, and then from there being able to recognize collision with the ball, things like that. It's about halfway completed from what I want it to be. But once I have that done, I'm going to do a whole tutorial series on how to get that working. But later on today, I'm going to make a tutorial on how to get the ball working with colors, how I can change colors and things like that. So look forward to that. But for the time being, we're going to have this one tutorial up. So let's just make sure it's working. So we get the initial message, press E to read. We press E, the texture loads. And then when we press Q, we walk away. The sounds play, the note's gone, and nothing else fires. So everything's working. So tell me what you think about this tutorial. Again, the link to the actual Kismet nodes, those render texture, render material, render text, and the render HUD event. Those are all going to be linked in the description. Towards the bottom of that page, there's going to be a link where you can download a zip folder with those Unreal script files. All you really need to do is put that into your build under the development source folder, I believe. And then from there, when you try to launch your build, it's going to tell you to rebuild the scripts. As long as everything passes, next time you go into Kismet, you'll have those options. And based on this tutorial, you should know how they work. So any questions, leave them in the comment section. Any other ideas for tutorials, put them in the comment section. Some people want me to actually make like level design, kind of like thought process tutorials. I'm trying to work on that kind of stuff. That kind of theory kind of videos are kind of tough for me, not too sure how to approach those, but hopefully I'll have some out there. And also, shout outs to, all the people subscribing, to all those still supporting the channel. Definitely appreciate it. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe, share the video, share the channel, like the video if you liked what was talked about today. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye. Bye-bye.